Okay, I think we can get started, everyone. So my name's Ari. I am one of the co-founders of Payload. I hope everyone here knows who I am at this point, because I think this is like the 7th or 8th webinar I've done. So I'm just going to assume you all know who I am. And Payload, we're a media company, and I'd be remiss in saying that we cover the space industry. So if you have news or announcements, let us know. And then if you want to buy advertising, I always got to pitch that. So let me know. Feel free to message me or connect with me offline, and happy to chat about that. But I'm really lucky to have Colleen Campbell as my guest today, CMO of Maxar. I'll turn it over to her and let her give you her background, and we can jump into things.
Thanks, Ari. I appreciate it. And good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are in the world. It's wonderful. And thank you for making the time to join me and Ari today. I look forward to our discussion. I'm sure Ari will go over the housekeeping notes in a second in case there's anybody who has any Q&A or chat at the end. But my name is Colleen Campbell. I am the Chief Marketing Officer. I also oversee communications here at Maxar Technologies. And Maxar is a world-leading space technology and intelligence company. And we have two capabilities that we do here. One is space infrastructure. We design, build, and engineer and operate our fleet of satellites. And then, of course, we have our Earth intelligence function, which is responsible for the imagery and the data observation that gets collected from our 4-satellite constellation and used throughout various products for both commercial and government use. I have 21 years of experience in strategic communications, digital advertising, as well as issues management and public affairs. I'm very fortunate that I've been at Maxar now for 2 years. We were recently a publicly traded company. We were just recently acquired it was in May when the deal closed, early May, by Advent International. So we are now a privately held company and a proud member of the Advent International portfolio. And I look forward to talking with you all more today. I spent 15 years of my career in various advertising and public affairs firms before going in-house. My first ever corporate job was actually at Northrop Grumman Corporation as a director of digital strategy and integrated communications. From there, I went on to be the VP of Marketing and Communications for Alliance Science and Technology. That was also a private equity-held company by Veritas that was sold to Huntington Ingalls Industries, HII, about 2 years ago. And now I'm here at Maxar. So really happy to be here today, Ari, and looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, and we appreciate you being here, Colleen. And before we get into things, I already had a bunch of questions just from your bio and background. I opened up the chat, so if anyone wants to chat, you can just introduce yourself or ask questions in the chat. You can also ask Q&A. I know some people want to ask questions, but they're like, oh no, this is a bad question, and they're afraid to ask it in public. So you can either put it in the Q&A and no one can see it, or you can also message. You could do hosts and panelists, and just message us, and I can look at it privately. So if anyone, hopefully nobody has any questions, but just wanted to let you all know that those options are open. So let's start with the biggest thing, and it's a huge question, but wanted to touch on it. So, obviously you guys were recently taken, private in, I think, as you said, May, though the deal was announced a bit before that. Let's start with the run up to the deal. What was it like in terms of just that communication and strategy around, okay, we're going to be taken private, how do you communicate that to shareholders? How do you communicate that to partners? What was the strategy there? And then I think also, I don't know closely with your deal. I feel like this wasn't an issue, but was there, we had to convince shareholders? Did you guys feel very confident that the deal would get voted on? Was that, part of the strategy and stuff? So we'll start with that question.
Yeah, I appreciate that question. And certainly as a formerly publicly traded company, we have our shareholders, we hold our fiduciary duty to our shareholders as number one, right? And so certainly it was a strong offer that certainly had strong, upside for our shareholders, we felt. But at the shareholders, as have a say when we bring the offers to them, and the board has a fiduciary duty to review, and they did. And also, our deal was unique in that we actually had I believe it was a an extended solicitation clause. So we had an additional time to see if there were any additional bidders, and there were not. So the shareholders voted yes, and I think it ended up being a very, very, very good situation for Maxar and our shareholders at the time. That being said, you asked specifically about strategy, and I think the important thing here is to be very thoughtful about all the stakeholders you need to communicate to. Certainly our employees, our team members here at Maxar were our number one, audience that we wanted to make sure that we were being responsive to their questions and addressing what we can about what was happening. And then, of course, we wanted to make sure that as the deal approvals go through, that we were very thoughtful and mindful with our updates on the various things that were happening as the deal progressed. So I think it was a very thoughtful strategy. I think we executed it well. And I think everyone is pretty pleased with how the deal turned out.
So, and obviously I think this isn't as important now that you're private, but when you're public, how do you, separate sort of those, as the CMO, how much of the communication comes from like CFO and IR on the employee side, or on that side versus the marketing channel? How do you separate those two? Do you work together? And hopefully everyone here eventually wants to be a publicly traded CMO and dealing with IR issues, but like how do you think about separating those two things? How are they together when you talk about communication with employees and with other stakeholders versus the shareholder strategy, the sort of the differing functions of the two?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I think that to be successful at this level and in this role, you have to be effective at cross collaboration. You just have to be. No one can do it alone on an island. And if you try to, you're ultimately going to limit your success. There is nothing that I do that does not involve in some form legal and some advisement from legal, right? Even today as a privately held company. And then, of course, working with HR and understanding the culture and the types of messages that we need to address to make our employees understand what is happening. And then investor relations, it's really about understanding what kind of feedback they are receiving from the current shareholders, and also, what other financial implications, because even as you're going through this, you are still a publicly traded company with all of the regulations that come with that. And so really understanding that comprehensive shareholder and stakeholder group, right, and how we need to communicate to it is key. And people play to their strengths. So not surprisingly, our CFO and IR took care of obviously the shareholder and most of that external class, but there was also a lot of media inquiries, Ari, as you can imagine, once the deal was announced in December, right, that were coming in. And so understanding questions from analysts that were coming in, questions from media, and then of course, what we are allowed to say during that time and what we are not allowed to say was really critical. And so I have to say it was a great cross collaboration. I think that's what's really key here when you get to things happening at that level.
And before I ask my next question, just as a reminder, if you guys have questions or comments, feel free to jump in the chat or jump in the Q&A. So my next question is, now that you guys are transitioning to a private company, how has the marketing strategy changed in any way? What are some of the things that are, beginning to change versus staying the same, to the extent you can answer? Maybe some of it's a bit secret sauce that you guys haven't announced yet.
Yeah, I love how you were very, very good about probing, Ari, and then kind of saying, but if you can't go that far, that's great. No, I appreciate it. No, I think honestly, what I am most excited about and what I'm seeing is this refined focus on our customers and the prioritization and focus on the solutions and capabilities Maxar has. And from a marketing perspective, that's exciting because what it allows us to do is to be much, much more targeted and have a greater understanding of our customer moving forward and how we can continue to provide those excellent solutions. And so I think from when I speak to my team and I talk to my leaders one-on-one, what this has really done for us in this next chapter for Maxar is really get us excited. And not only that, really refine our creativity. I'm very proud of my team and the new ways of storytelling and engagement with our brand that they are bringing forward For anyone who was just at the Esri user conference, you might have been in our booth and seen that we're doing a lot now with augmented reality, making use of obviously Maxar's leading solutions in 3D data and technology. And so I think that is only going to extend further into marketing. And for anyone who is watching what we do in our Maxar News Bureau, we're actually incorporating more and more of our solutions into that reporting that we do and imagery, as well as information we are giving to the media. So that includes with the recent heat wave, Ari, that's been sweeping the United States. We've been doing some analysis with our Maxar Weather Desk solution to actually showcase the really changing weather patterns and extreme weather outcomes that are happening as part of that. And we're very pleased to see that that's been well received, and we look forward to doing more of that in the future. So I think there's just this renewed honestly, invigoration in terms of marketing. And what I really appreciate is that, as opposed to being perhaps fearful of change or what might happen next, I think my team is embracing it as this huge opportunity to really try some things that we've always wanted to do or further extend into the marketplace. So I'm excited about that.
So let's talk about Maxar News Bureau. I think that's sort of, in my opinion, one of the most successful initiatives you guys have on the Maxar marketing side. I think, you know, when I turn on CNN or I go on, you know, New York Times website or whatever it may be, if I see a satellite image, it's usually a Maxar image. And I think you guys have done a really good job of owning that. You know, can you talk about, you know, why you all have been so successful on that front? Because there are other imagery companies out there, but, you know, I feel like majority of the time it's your imagery that we see. So what has been the reason for that success, and can you talk a bit about, you know, how that's, you know, been executed on?
Sure, I'd be happy to. And I should say that our Maxar News Bureau is run by our senior director, Stephen Wood, who I think many of you have seen in the press. He's given many interviews, giving overviews of the Maxar News Bureau and our operations here. And the truth of the matter is, I will say the Maxar News Bureau is an incredible function that we have here at Maxar. It was started in 2017 as our legacy company, Digital Globe, started it. And I believe the first year, and hopefully Steve can come into the chat if he's on, or even one of his teammates can come into the chat if they're on and keep me honest here. But I believe they started with about, I'm going to say 25 journalists emailing in, and it started with a specific investigative project at the time that Maxar was able to provide imagery for. And Ari, since that time, what started out as maybe 5 or 6 investigative journalists, you know, writing to us, say, hey, I'm working on illegal fishing, or I'm working on human trafficking, or I'm working on this. Does Maxar have any imagery? We have actually done more than 1,500 individual projects with journalists since 2017. And on a given year, on average, we do about 225 projects that come into the News Bureau for Maxar assistance. I will say this year, though, we are about to have the largest number of projects that we've ever done at the News Bureau, with about 220 projects already done in July. So if we do about 225 a year and we're already at 220 for July, you can get a sense of how it's becoming so impactful for the storytelling that journalism does today. And what we really appreciate is it also gives us some insight into the types of topics and investigative, I would say, queries that are really, challenging and really intrepid journalists are answering. And so we are very pleased to assist in any way we can through the News Bureau. So that's been really wonderful. I will say, obviously, as you can imagine, our network has grown substantially. Right before the war in Ukraine, we were hovering right around 600 media journalists who can sign up for the News Bureau. And if anybody is watching and you are interested in receiving our weekly News Bureau take, as we call it, you can go to maxar.com/News Bureau. And if you're a journalist, you can sign up there to become part of our network, as well as submit inquiries for anything you might be working on. But we had about 600 before the war broke out in the Ukraine, and we've almost doubled that in a year's time. It continues to grow. And I will also say that the use cases that we are approached about continues to expand. And that's really, really impactful as well. So to see, Nari, you know this, running a media company, to see journalists actually engaging and us being able to provide information and data to help them with their reporting is one of the most rewarding things I think my team does. And we are very proud to do it. And we certainly hope that we continue to do so as we move forward.
So few follow-up questions from that. Firstly, was more a comment than a question. I think one of the things that we've talked a lot about in these conversations I've had with other marketers is like so many people are focused on just pitching stories to journalists about their companies, and I think you all are a great example of people people getting pitched or journalists getting pitched. Things that tie into their stories, that aren't about the company. And, people need to do, or companies need to do a better job of that, of like, hey, we're not going to talk to you about our company announcement. We're going to talk to you about like something we're doing that ties into a bigger story. And you guys have definitely done a great job of that, obviously, since, you guys are everywhere and have turned it into a literally like a part of your business. The question that was asked in the chat was, are you like pushing these stories proactively? Are a lot of it inbound? How do you sort of, and then I guess as a follow-up to that as well, like when you think about outbound stories, how are you being proactive with it? Are a lot of it just relationships you have? And then actually ask a third follow-up question to it. I know a lot of people here, a lot of them, they'll get like they'll get print or web relationships. TV, I know, is something that, we've talked about, and it's so much harder to get in touch with bookers or producers. Can you also talk about the difference between, pitching online print versus pitching TV? So I'm happy to repeat those questions if you forget them as you're answering.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Ari. I'll try to take them one by one because I'll probably combine number 1 and 2 if I could. So it is, for us, we want to offer something of value. So we do create a weekly kind of roundup that we do give to that list of journalists I told you about, that we proactively do push out of just really relevant imagery that we have seen. And we're also very blessed that we are with our partner Umbra. We have a SAR agreement for their imagery as well, that sometimes we can highlight theirs as well, but it's mostly Maxar information. And so they can use it in their reporting, right, for things that are just happening that are timely around the globe, right? I think your audience will remember that's really how we were able to do a lot of this around Ukraine. Is we started providing that. And then, of course, not surprisingly, we started getting a lot of inbound inquiries. So we do have this push-pull dynamic. When I talked about those projects earlier and the number around those projects, we do about 225 a year. We've done 220 this year. Those are inbounds to us in terms of helping assist. And so we work very, very hard as part of our corporate social responsibility to work with journalists to help them as much as we can with imagery or information and data around the investigative stories. And so we're very, very proud of that. And when it comes to broadcast, in terms of what you provide versus, what you and how you pitch and developing those relationships, I always say you have to be able to contribute something to the conversation that gets their audience more engaged in what is happening. So a really good example of this was when we produced our 3D video of the 40-mile long convoy, the Russian convoy that was heading to the Ukrainian border. From 2D satellite imagery, we were able to create this amazing 3D video that we were able to give to the press around the world, actually illustrating the breadth and depth of this convoy. And I think that's just a great way to illustrate all of Maxar's capabilities coming together, in this case for media purposes, to illustrate a major event that was happening globally. And so I will say that you have to know your audience. Certainly our images were out there, but turning it into that video and having people actually see the terrain, see what was happening, see the depth of what was actually coming towards the Ukrainian border, I think was very impactful and obviously very well suited for web as well as broadcast.
And then, I think talking about just to get specific on the web versus broadcast, is it much harder to pitch broadcast versus what? I mean, maybe this isn't the right question for someone like you in this conversation, because a lot of the folks we are dealing with are startups that they don't have the brand that Maxar's built. But like, what do you find sort of the differences between pitching TV versus pitching that online print?
Pitching TV, you've got to help, you need to help them produce. And so saying, here's where we fit into your reporting, in our case, has been really impactful. Like, here are the resources we can bring to bear. Here's our subject matter expertise. Here is someone who can speak very, very in depth on the specific technology issue, right? Or engineering advancement. I think that's really key. So one, really bring assets to the table with broadcast and give them a sense of how it would flow. Also make sure that you have additional resources available to them. So what I mean by that is it takes very little investment to get really good B-roll. It takes a lot to maintain really good B-roll, but it doesn't take a lot of investment to get really good.
Sorry to interrupt. What's B-roll?
B-roll are like the background images we would have of our corporate headquarters, our flags, maybe some key apparatus models, things of that nature, just ready to go, right, for broadcast press or even for digital press, right? So, if you and I were doing a broadcast piece, if we were to turn this webinar into one, we might cut away from me and have a voiceover of me talking while I had images of people working in Westminster, Colorado at our corporate headquarters on various projects, or we might cut to our Palo Alto facility where we manufacture our satellites, right? And you would just see that imagery, right, as quick snippet video. So that's B-roll. And I will also say, if you don't have B-roll, if you are startup mode, definitely have the schematics and design that you can release, right? It doesn't violate your IP or give away any trade secrets. So whether that's around your design, your concept, how it's supposed to work, that's really impactful to have for media, so they can actually start to understand how you are a disruptor in the industry, and how you are carrying that forward into the market you're hoping to capture. So there are just things that I think for broadcast as well as digital, that just helps to have ready to go in your toolbox. And then, of course, revisiting that on a regular basis. But when it comes to broadcast, help them put together the segment. Say, here's kind of a point of view on how we think we could help you shape this segment, and here's what we bring to bear for that. When it comes to pitching print journalists, it really is about making sure they understand, again, it depends on who you're pitching, right? If I am pitching, a really in-depth trade publication in defense, I'm going to make sure that we have not only understanding about our technology, but how it specifically relates to their readership, right? So whether it's warfighters, whether it's mission planners, whether it's, virtual training, right? I'm really going to custom tailor that message, and I'm going to provide as much information through thought leadership and subject matter expertise, as well as imagery or schematics, like I said before, or graphics that I can, to make sure that we're telling a cohesive story.
So I was worried that no one was paying attention. Now the chat's blowing up. We're getting some Q&A. So few questions. I'll try to go in order, but one makes logical sense first. A lot of these companies, when I speak to them, they're like, "Oh, I don't understand the point of marketing." It's like, what are the KPIs? Or what's the ROI on this? And for you all, like, your imagery is everywhere, but like, it's kind of, in some ways almost hard to measure. And I know, like, for myself, before I got into space, like, if I saw a satellite image, I wouldn't be like, "Oh, what is that little watermark on the bottom right? What company is that?" Like, I never thought about that. Now that I'm in it, first thing I look at isn't even the image, it's what company is it. But how do you measure, that KPI or ROI? How can you, go to management and be like, "Oh, this is really working for us"? Like, what is the measurement and indication of success there?
So let's not forget what marketing's main purpose is, and that's to encourage market growth, right? So it's about the retention of customers and the growth of customers, and the introduction and hopefully adaptation of new products and services to a specific customer set. And I will say at Maxar, because we have commercial customers as well as government customers globally everywhere. It's an interesting, and I will say fun, challenge to make sure that we are constantly making sure that our methods are capturing the right customer segments, right? And so you asked about how do you measure it? you really measure it by making sure you have set up the proper analytics as well as customer feedback loops. So things that you don't necessarily see, in your marketing tech stack or your Google Analytics or other things, but you also get that anecdotal feedback from customers on what they're hoping to see in your products and services. Because ultimately, Ari, at the end of the day, as a business, we are here to serve our customers. And we want to make sure that we are providing the best customer experience through our products and services, and we are addressing their needs. So our product roadmaps, our developmental life cycles, all those things map back to customer success. And I think that's KPI number one. KPI number two is really to your question on investment, like how much is that marketing budget that is given, to set aside, translate into that growth. And I think that area is where I really turn to how can we look at and be sure how many touch points it takes to really get customers engaged and also retain them. And so we look very, very closely at who's engaging with what when, and then we factor that into our customer life cycle to make sure that we are, one, giving the customer what they need to be educated around our solutions and products, and then two, that we are updating them appropriately as we add new features, and then three, that we're making sure that the industry knows what problems we're trying to solve. I think what's interesting is sometimes we have a tendency in marketing to overcomplicate things and think we have to reinvent the wheel for every single vertical that we support, when in reality we just need to make better use cases across the board and show people how we are solving something over here and how it could specifically apply to what they are trying to solve over there. And so I think that's something we've gotten better at. And we will continue to get better at, but I will tell you, when I see a customer make a direct one-to-one correlation with, oh, you've already done it for them, you can do it for us, I get very excited.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely something that a lot of people in the chat, at least based on conversations I have frustrations with, of like, oh, it's just anecdotal, it's sometimes harder to measure, and they'll be.
Everyone wants the magic bullet. Like everyone wants to say, you saw my ad, you came to my booth, you looked at in my case, my augmented reality site, therefore you bought from us, right? Like everyone wants that. But here's what we know. So let's take a corollary that I know many of my friends out there must support, is also talent acquisition and retention, right? Which is huge, as we know, in our space, right? For STEM development and growth of our workforce. One of the things we know in something that we've been working on is it takes multiple exposures to content. So whether that be on social media, whether it be through earned media, whether it be through advertising, to even get someone to start and complete an application for employment. And so when you start thinking about that and applying some of those principles to the actual product and services side of the marketing side, you start to see the same patterns emerge. And I think it's really important for people to kind of think across those lines. It's not just a one-shot thing that does it. It's not the one campaign that's going to get people in the door. You got to keep at it and meet people where they are. And in our diversified media structure today, and Ari, you know this better than anybody, that takes a lot. So you have to be able to think through it strategically. Yeah,
I definitely deal with that a lot when we're selling advertising of, how are we measuring this? And I'm like, takes time sometimes, and you can't just run an ad for 8 weeks or do one webinar. You have to do it for sometimes years, especially when you're selling to the government. But on to the next question, which if you guys missed the beginning of our conversation, we were joking about Colleen's background and then I don't know if anyone remembers the Bliss image from the Microsoft. I think it was like OS, I forgot which one. And was it AI? Was it real? But one of the questions in the chat is, there's all this conversation about AI, and you guys take images of real things, but how is AI playing maybe changing that or evolving what Maxar does? How are you all looking at AI as integrating into your strategy?
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I like the question, because I think what AI is allowing what Maxar to do is speed up the analysis necessary for decision makers to be informed and make decisions. So at Maxar, we believe in human machine teaming, where AI is a mechanism to help us understand the data faster to get people to make informed decisions and take action. So a good example of that would be object detection, right? You see cars, or if you're in perhaps a military operation zone, you might see tanks, planes, trucks, etc. The AI has gotten so good now in our training that we can actually not just tell you, hey, that's a truck or that's a car. We can actually probably tell you what exactly it is. So, hey, that's a C-130, or hey, that's an F-15, etc., and do that globally, which I think is great. And I think the other thing it does is it starts to look at pattern detection, recognition, then of course heading and navigation. Right. So, where are things going? How are they coming in? On the commercial side, very famously, there are examples. And we see a lot of them come out, I think, right around the holidays in particular, at least in the United States, where, they'll count the number of cars at various shopping malls. I always feel that's a local news story, right, Ari? How many cars are in the parking lot at various shopping facilities, to give an indication in some cases of the demand for in-person shopping versus, online shopping for any given holiday season, right? So that's kind of a commercial example there. But AI is becoming increasingly important as we look at understanding object transit, navigation, and then more importantly, where do we see also what we call persistent change management, or where do we see changes, right? So AI is becoming very good at saying, hey, what was there 12 hours ago is no longer there, and here's what's here now. Right. And I think that's what's really interesting about AI, is really just speeding up that decision-making factor. And then, of course, I think AI will play more of a role as we look at how we engage moving forward. I mean, I think the possibilities are endless in AI. It's just a matter of how we continue to foster that human-machine teaming, because we know AI is only as good as the data it's got. If it's garbage in, it's garbage out. And so just understanding, and what I think is so great about Maxar is because we do have the largest high resolution archive of imagery in the world, that we have the ground truth, right, of really established data that is really verified for these training purposes. So I'm really excited to see what we can even do next in AI. I think it's going to be a huge disruptor, not only for our industry, but all industries in business. And I think it's exciting for what happens next.
So I want to also ask a more specific question to you. What are the marketing team doing with it? Are you guys using ChatGPT to write a blog post and then someone's editing it? What are some specific?
I hope my team's not doing that.
So if anyone on the team is doing that, just stop right now. Don't.
I hope my team's not doing that. No, ChatGPT is wonderful. It's fun to play with, but I think first of all, let me say this. I actually see more upside for the tools in marketing communications than downside. I know some people may have an opposite point of view, but hear me out. It's great for ideation. It's great for that first creative cut and just getting ideas on a whiteboard and thinking through things. It's great for, I would say, a distorted self-reflection a bit, right? When you look at the competitive landscape in doing that. But that being said, AI is still in its infancy. And we need to make sure that we are using it for the right things. And so I know my creative team, for example, is just starting, and actually they were early adopters of some of the generative AI tools, to start thinking about how we show up in the marketplace, when it comes to advertising for campaigns and getting our heads around, what's going to resonate and break through. I think they've done a really great job of using it for ideation. I think if my communications team were to use ChatGPT or any of the other tools to maybe initially start things, I will say my team is very savvy, and they know, and whatever you train the AI on or put into the AI to get an output, right, that now gets put into the global database of things for people to pull from, right? Because keep in mind, AI scrapes, right, for information so it can come back with the correct answer. So whatever we put out is permanently out there and could potentially also be used against us. And I don't know if anybody's played around with some of the features in ChatGPT, but you can actually take the position of a competitor, or you could take the position of a customer even that you may be trying to attract, and kind of get a sense more of how they might like information presented or how they would like to see you show up. And again, great for ideation, but not great to use as just a rip and run. I think we're far away from that. And I think, again, that human machine teaming is going to extend even into our world.
Yeah, it's I remind myself of like the Black Mirror episodes of some of the crazy AI stuff that's going on. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon.
I hope not. And by the way, for anyone who is effectively using it, please drop me a note. I would love to hear how you are using it. Let's trade them for, let's trade use cases back and forth. I also think though, and Ari, I will have to see how this shakes out over time, but I do think content that's created with AI should be labeled as such. Right. And I think we're starting to see some of our first indications of where that might be happening, just so people understand that this was created with AI, not with the use of AI, but with AI. So purely AI generated content, I think, should be, labeled for people to understand what that is.
Yeah, I remember when it came out and there were all the images of like the Pope with his white coat looking like very swag. I don't know if you saw those images that people were like, I can't believe this is Pope, and it was like got picked up and it was fake. It was mid journey.
Yeah, we're starting to see more and more of this. I think the ones that scare me the most are the fake attacks, right? Or the fake reporting of this is happening in this area of the world, right? And for some reason, someone takes it as truth and it goes viral either on X or social media now. And just, it can have a real world impact. And I think that's why it's so important to, really understand the technology and how to spot in some cases what a deep fake looks like, but it's getting harder.
Yeah, most definitely. So I want to shift gears a bit to another question from the Q&A. And again, as a reminder, ask questions in the chat, ask questions in the Q&A. We'll try to get to it. I also added, for anyone who might have missed it, Colleen's LinkedIn. If you want to connect with her, and then you can, message her through LinkedIn and go from there. But, we talked about a lot around strategy and going private. So a good question that I like from the chat today and think about. Is there anything you could do as a private company now from the marketing side that you couldn't as a public company?
Good question. And so far I haven't encountered one yet. I think what's exciting about, this is just, like I said, that refined focus that we have and that creativity that that creative energy that I think is being reinvigorated in a lot of ways. But I haven't encountered anything yet where I'm like, hey, we can totally do this now because we're not, public anymore. I haven't encountered that yet.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, that's the only thing I always hear is like companies just talking about their blackout periods and stuff, which I know are a pain, but it maybe didn't affect you as much at Maxar for those.
I would say, that's more of on a communication side, to be very fair. Like the blackout periods, when you can't really report any more material impact, right? You have to wait till earnings for that to happen. That's more on the communication side. But I mean, look, at the end of the day, we always need to be recruiting. We always need to be promoting our solutions and products and services. So like I say, from a marketing standpoint, if I'm taking it purely as asked, I haven't encountered anything yet.
Got it. From a communications then, to maybe a bit more like anything there as well, or just what have been the differences?
From a communication sense, I will say that, the one thing I've noticed is that operationally now, I think that we are streamlining a lot of things. And I will say that the opportunity for even more enhanced storytelling is available to us now, which I'm excited about. So getting back to my previous comments about having those schematics, those graphics, those images, I'm hoping we can actually produce them faster because we no longer have to devote some time that we had to do before to, really doing a lot of the investor support, right, as a publicly held company now. So that's exciting.
So in terms of my next question, I think a lot of what we talked about with Maxar is around imagery and satellites, but you guys own Space Systems Loral. It's a subsidiary, and I think you guys just built that Jupiter 3. Not
a subsidiary.
Oh, my fault. What is it?
No,
I don't even know. So
It's
just part of
Maxar.
Maxar. Got it. It's funny on Wikipedia. Because I was doing some research. I think they list it as a wholly owned. Okay.
Thank you for telling me that, because I will make sure we get that updated.
Yes,
I was unaware that it was listed. So no, but it's a good question. So Maxar came together in 2017. Actually, it's 4 companies. One was divested. That was MDA. And so now it's Legacy Radiant, Legacy SSL, and Legacy Digital Globe, right, that make up Maxar. And that's how we're organized today. But yes, continue with your question. But yeah,
which is actually this discussion is sort of part of my question, which is like, how do you make sure those parts of the business get attention? Because people are so focused on Maxar being an imagery company. And you guys built the Jupiter 3. I feel like this.
We did. We built Jupiter 3.
It's stories like that I feel like aren't like they're Maxar stories, but I don't hear about them as much because so much is focused on the imagery and the satellite imagery and stuff. So how do you make sure attention's given to that?
Yeah, so I appreciate that. I'd like to think that we've done a much better job in recent years of highlighting all the work that's being done by our space infrastructure group, which obviously designs, engineers, and manufactures commercial satellites, as well as satellites for civil missions with NASA and NOAA, and then, of course, national security space, right? All done out there in our Palo Alto facility, which is fantastic. But it's an interesting question that you just raised, Ari, because I think your real question was talking about if you are a brand who has subsidiaries, how do you devote your time? And I think I can answer that because Maxar does have a subsidiary. It's called Wovenware. It's a wonderful technology company that we acquired also last year. And they are a Maxar company, right? And if you were to look at their profile, it would say Wovenware, a Maxar company. And we are very fortunate that it came with a very strong marketing and communications team, as well as a very strong talent acquisition team that does a lot of work to make sure they maintain their very strong brand equity in Wovenware to make sure that they are attracting the top talent in Puerto Rico. And I think that's really important. And how we support them, number one, is by trying to stay out of their way, because they are very good at what they do. And number two is understanding where we can be of assistance. So, for example, we have a lot of synergies through our digital media, right? If they are posting something, Maxar is probably going to repost it and amplify it. If they are doing something in the press, we are going to go out of our way to try to amplify it or do cross promotion or even cross pitching here in the United States as appropriate. I want to be on the mainland as appropriate. So that's really where I think the support of subsidiaries comes in, is where can you help enhance their business and their story that they're telling. And I'm very blessed that our Wovenware colleagues are extremely good at what they do. And we actually are also able to reach back to them for assistance. And so I'm very grateful for that, because certainly they are experts in what they do in the digital realm, and that's been tremendously helpful to us.
So question that got asked in the chat that I don't know if you can share much, but any updates on Worldview Legion? What can you share there?
I have no information to share on Worldview Legion at this time. I'm sorry.
All good. All good.
No information I can share at this time.
It was asked, so wanted to make sure that's an update though, just for the record, so that counts. So we got that question out of the way. So our next question is about social media. Do you consider it like a separate strategy, or is it part of like a bigger strategy where social media is just one aspect of it? How do you guys, view social?
So let me back it up a little bit. I'll answer that directly. So at Maxar, we have and we follow what's called the Integrated Marketing Communications Model, the IMC model. And it's a model that's been around for a very long time. But basically, it states that we're going to meet our stakeholders wherever they are in their journey to make sure that they understand and appreciate, hopefully will start to adopt and then be our champions moving forward. So really think about that cycle of from an awareness to really being an evangelist, right? So we have this IMC model that really looks at that. Where social media fits into the IMC model is it's kind of that intersection, as I like to say, between marketing and communications in a lot of ways, right? Because it's digital marketing. You can promote things on the channel. You can buy advertising on the social media channels, but you also have the organic, right? And what we put out in the content we produce. And so I like to see it kind of sits in that nice little nexus there. And as we all know, in today's media society, most people, when they're looking for breaking information or more information or company reaction to something that is happening, is going to go to the company's social media channels first. Usually that's probably where they're going. And journalists as well, Ari, and I know probably at Payload, you all probably use social quite a bit to stay on top of various subjects and topics that your journalists are reporting on. And so I think it's really important to view social media as this nexus of your ability to communicate out, as well as the ability to see the engagement, the questions, the comments that are coming back in. And that's a really good indicator of how it works. So when we think about the strategy for social media, we think about it in terms of what can we share that is of value. So Ari, getting back to the original point of our imagery, if you've been on any of our channels, you've seen a lot of our imagery and highlights that go on. What is going on from a business perspective, right? We did a lot of promotion last week around J3 as it went to the launch. So that's really exciting. So what's going on the business side? And then more importantly, what can we contribute to the overall industry conversation? And you see us do that a lot on the Earth Intelligence side, where we have promotion of the Maxar blog and the Maxar blog posts that we put out on social, a lot of in-depth kind of technical information in some cases that we also promote. And then also just having fun. If you've ever been to a Maxar event or one of our trade show booths, you will see a lot of videos that we do virtual booth tours and promote them up on social media for those who are unable to be in attendance so they can get a sense of what we're doing. Or if they're there and just overwhelmed with schedule, we try to put it up. So, hey, if you don't have time to come by, you can at least see here what we were doing, and please contact us if you want more information, right? And so I think we're using it in a lot of smart ways. And then, of course, we're using it to promote our corporate social responsibility. Maxar has the For a Better World Foundation, that we're very proud of. And we recently just gave out our most recent grants to our grantees. And we wrote a great deal about the recipients and also how that grant money is being used for various STEM initiatives, as well as supporting military families and veterans. So I think we're being very smart about how we use it, but it's really about storytelling and what's resonating with the audiences and making sure people understand the breadth and depth of all that goes on within the company.
So a follow-up question on that. How do you decide, when you guys are, and like we can talk about social, but we could also talk more broad too, like when you're going to deal with it in-house versus hiring an agency to help with this type of stuff, whether it's strategy, whether it's paid spend, what are sort of the decision-making tools or the considerations that are in play when you're making those decisions?
I appreciate that. I think, and I saw that question when you invited me to come do this today, and it is such a good question of when do you decide to bring certain capabilities in-house versus when would I hire a third-party agency partner to come with us? And I will say here at Maxar, we view our agencies as extensions of our group. We very much like to work as a unit, which is great. But I will say it's hard. But I will say there's a couple of criteria I found that is helpful. One, does it help us go faster? Is it just going to help us go faster to get to the goal? And the second criteria is what is the agency bringing to the table that complements or perhaps addresses a gap that we need addressed. And so it's not just about necessarily solving for my specific problem, but it's also the additive. What is the additional capability that they are bringing to the table? And so I think that, for example, in communications, as we continue to scale globally, agencies that have capability and real relationships with trade reporters overseas, that complements the outstanding relationships that my communication team already has, is a wonderful benefit. Right? It's absolutely wonderful. And that'd be a really good example of the teaming. An agency that provides really enhanced analytics that easily plugs back into our existing business dashboards, right, for tracking of success. that's additive and it's welcome. And I think that's really interesting. So it's a tough question to answer, but it really is, can you help address our immediate problem to help us go faster? And what additional capability can you bring to the table that only makes us a better organization?
And I appreciate that answer. We only have one or two more questions. So if anyone has any final questions or comments, let us know. I have a backup question if if anyone doesn't. But I'll give it a sec if anyone wants to throw in a last minute question or comment. But I'll ask my backup question, which it'll be like a quicker question. Any like big tips? I always sometimes hate this question, but I like to ask it anyway. Any of those like cliche, like, what's one big piece of advice that you got in your career, like for people to think about as a marketer? It's kind of cliche because then I always feel like my responses to these questions are always like, it's hard to give response to that when there's, you don't have context, but I like to ask it anyway. So you got any like one a tip or an advice or a line that you can give to everyone?
I'm gonna break it into threefold. Number one, as personally, stay curious, which I know everyone says, but it's really true. I know, Ari, but stay curious. And it really is like, why is that working the way it is? Why are we doing it this way? Why is my favorite question. And then we get to why and how, but stay curious. The second thing is, if you're a manager, your job is to make sure your team can do their jobs and do it well, and try to remove as many barriers as possible and create as many relationships for your people to excel. And that is your job as a manager. Best advice I've ever gotten. And then the last thing I'll say is, and I know if anyone is a Scott Galloway fan and listens to his podcast like I do, he often says, much of your success is not your fault and much of your failure is not your fault. In business, it's sometimes just about being in business. And don't take things too personally. Always be self-aware and self-reflective, but also sometimes recognize when things are just not your fault or your success is even not, your fault. So show gratitude. My attitude is gratitude all the time. And I found that staying open also is a really, really, really good mindset to have.
Well, really appreciate that. Seems like no more comments or questions. So, thanks everyone again for joining. I want to thank Colleen. I always pitch, I have to end it on, if you're interested in advertising with Payload, which is what keeps these webinars going, let me know. Just, message me on LinkedIn or email me. And then we plan to do the next one of these webinars next month with Italian Trade Agency, talking about marketing with Italy and space. So you'll look out for that, and I'll be posting the Zoom link soon. Thanks again, Colleen. Really appreciate it. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you, everyone else who joined us today. Appreciate it.